Good morning. Welcome to the web seminar. We give people just a couple minutes to join. Good morning. If you're just joining us, we're just giving people another minute or so to jump on, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, I'm going to put this slide deck that we're using today in the chat so that if you're one of those people that prefers to kind of have it downloaded already, that you can do that. All right, well, why don't we dive in here? Good morning again. Welcome. Happy Halloween. I hope everyone's Halloween was filled with candy and fun. And happy Wednesday. We're here today to participate on this webinar, Make a Plan to File, Preparing for the Foster Youth Tax Credit. And first, before we jump in, I just want to go over a few kind of housekeeping items here. So we like to, at JBay, we like to use the questions, the Q&A box versus the chat box. So you're welcome to use the chat function, but it's only going to come to hosts and panelists. And we prefer, if you're sending questions, to please send them that you want covered in Q&A, to please send them through the question and answer chat, because we can sort of sort them a little easier there. So thank you for doing that. And then in terms of accessing the materials, I just put the link to the PowerPoint in the chat box. I'll do it again because I know if you join after I do it, you can't see it. So we'll do that again. And then we'll be sending that out along with the recording of this web seminar later today. And that'll also be posted in our resource library on our website. So this is our agenda. We will be welcoming you and doing some introductions. We'll provide an overview of common tax credits for current and former foster youth. We will talk briefly about the Foster Youth Tax Credit Challenge, and then we'll sort of take this in chronological order for how it works for young people. Helping youth prepare to file is a big thing we'll talk about today. How to conduct outreach and what to say, what to give youth, what resources to provide to them. And how to connect them with free filing assistance. We'll talk about kind of these little sub bullets. We'll talk about the ways to file. And then we'll kind of talk about the aftermath of tax filing. So what you file and then what? And what if there's issues that come up? So we'll kind of address some of those. And then we'll do a question and answer session. So please do submit questions at any point in the questions and answer box. And we'll cover those at the end of the webinar. So I'm joined today by three amazing people. So again, I don't even actually think I did introduce myself. My name is Simone Turek-Lee. I'm with John Burton Advocates for Youth, and I'm our Director of Housing and Health here. I'm also joined by Andy Loma-Lee. Andy is a project manager with John Burton Advocates for Youth. And then Carla Macias. Carla is a consultant that we're working with, and she actually formerly worked for Santa Clara County, which is the first county we sort of piloted some of this tax support work with. So she's been with us from the beginning in terms of working on this project, and has just changed hats, and is now has retired from the county and is consulting with JBay. And her consulting business is called Foster Advantage Consulting. And then we're joined, last but not least, by Luis Madrid. Luis is with Aspiranet. He is a division director there, and Aspiranet is a large nonprofit organization that provides a wide range of services and programs for youth currently or formerly in foster care. And I'm sure he may say more about Aspiranet later, but they are a provider that sweeps across several counties and really has a good grip on sort of what's happening at a regional level. So as I mentioned, we'll start off with just kind of an overview. Now, we don't believe, in order to help young people get connected to tax filing assistance or to help young people with their taxes, that you have to be an expert in tax filing yourself. Not all of us need to become certified tax preparation volunteers, but you do need to know a little bit, and you need to know the general information. And so first, we're just going to talk about kind of that high level information that we think everyone should know. So of course, we're going to lead here. I'm sure it's no surprise. We're going to lead here with the California Foster Youth Tax Credit. It's really the impetus for all this. And I think, as most of you know, this is a new credit. 2024 will be the second year that this credit's available to young people. So we're still in what I'd consider the implementation stage. We really want everyone on this webinar to leave today with some thoughts about how you can help get the word out about this new credit and how youth can access it. So we'll cover kind of what you need to know about that on the webinar today. So the Foster Youth Tax Credit was established in 2021. We proposed this idea to the governor, and he was very supportive of it. He included $21 million in the state budget for it. And we had tremendous support in making this happen through the former state controller, Betty Yee, as well as key members of the legislature. And this tax credit's administered by the California Franchise Tax Board because it's a state credit. So not federal, not the IRS, but the FTB. And the FTB does this in partnership with the California Department of Social Services because they are in charge of verifying youth eligibility. And I want to add that verification has gone quite smoothly to our knowledge. Let us know if that's not been your experience, but there does not, at least on the outside, there does not appear to have been hiccups, which is really exciting because I know that everyone kind of in the foster care world knows that verification can be tricky. And luckily, that has not been the case here. They seem to have really developed a good system. The Foster Youth Tax Credit is a program of the California Earned Income Tax Credit, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And the credit amount increases slightly each year. So in 2023, it was $1,083. You probably are familiar with if you've been following this. And next year, it's going to be $1,117. So that's the sort of difference in the amounts. Youth who make up to $25,000 receive that full credit amount. And then those who make in between $25,000 and $30,931, the credit starts to phase out. So once you hit that kind of $30,931 mark, you don't receive the credit. But up until $25,000 of earned income, you're receiving that $1,117. So in 2024, to receive the credit, youth have to file their 2023 taxes. And they could also file 2022 taxes if they missed it in 2022. And the eligibility is as follows for filing your 2023 taxes. They have to have been between 18 and 25, so meaning have not turned 26 on the last day of the tax year. So in this case, for next year, it'll be December 31, 2023. They have to have been in foster care on or after their 13th birthday. Like I said, this is a program of the Cali ITC, meaning youth have to have some earned income during the tax year, but $1 is all that's needed. So youth have to have earned at least $1 in 2023. And then, like I said, once you hit, $30,931, you really aren't eligible for the credit. But most young people that we're working with are not earning that much money. So, in most cases, youth are going to be eligible for the credit in terms of income. And then lastly, you have to have lived in California for at least half the tax year. So 2023 in this case, and you also need a social security number, or if you're undocumented, an individual taxpayer identification number or an ITIN. But that's really more about what you need to file your taxes anyways. So one thing I should add, I did mention that if you didn't get the credit when you filed your 2022 taxes, you can get it next year. But I also just want to say that, and I think some people must know this, is that the tax deadline was actually extended through November 16th of this year. They just announced this recently. So technically, there's still a couple weeks if youth have not filed their 2022 taxes to file them this year and claim the credit. But again, if they don't do that, they can file them. They can file prior year taxes next year if they want to. So some of you know because you were on the webinar, but we just hosted a webinar in September reporting out on the first year of implementation of the Foster Youth Tax Credit. This slide provides kind of a very high level information from that webinar. And this is really what we're looking at for the first year of implementation. 4,847 youth received the foster youth tax credit. You'll note the numbers that are in our September webinar are slightly different because we stopped, it was earlier, and more youth have filed since then. Not very many, but some youth. So the numbers are just a little different. If you're wondering, that's why. And this is about 8.7% of the population eligible for the foster youth tax credit. Just over $5 million was received by these roughly 4,800 young people for the foster youth tax credit alone. But we know that when youth file their taxes, they often receive other credits they're eligible for. So in total, sort of those orange numbers you see there are really the combined amount that youth received in their tax returns. So for single filers, they received an average of $1,906, and for parenting filers, head of household, they received an average of $5,343. So you can see it's significantly higher for youth who are parenting. And we know this because we have data from specialized tax assistance sites that we've been partnering with that assisted hundreds of current and former foster youth. So we know that from their data. And then lastly, I thought it was important to add information about how youth are filing, because this really speaks to, the things that you need to talk to young people about, right? So most youth, 85%, are filing themselves, which is called self-filing. Self-filing really means they either use the free tax site, like myfreetaxes.org, or they use a paid program like TurboTax, or there's also an unpaid version of TurboTax, a little less common. So 85% are self-filing in some form. And then 10% filed at what's called a VITA site. We'll talk more about VITA sites later, but they're essentially volunteer income tax assistance sites. And you're getting kind of one-on-one assistance from a tax preparer for free. And then 5% used paid preparers. So kind of same concept, but you pay for it. And we'll also say this with a caveat that, more youth likely used paid preparers and just may not receive the credit. And we'll explain that a little more later. But we know all of this because the Franchise Tax Board makes amazing data available on a regular basis during tax season about how many youth are filing for this credit, the Cali ITC, and the Young Child Tax Credit by county, by filing type, like all these different stats. And it's really been so useful to understand implementation of this in its first year. It's how we know that 4,847 youth have received the credit so far. So thank you, FTB, for that data. So part of the reason this credit was established was really to incentivize filing because there are other credits that youth are commonly eligible for. You just heard that youth received an average of $1,900 or over $5,000 if they were parenting. Obviously, that's not all from the foster youth tax credit. That's because of all these credits. And there are credits that are non-refundable tax credits, and there are credits that are refundable or cashback tax credits. Most of these here are cashback tax credits. You'll see the ones with the asterisks are not. Those are not refundable. So a refundable or a cashback tax credit reduces what you owe, and then once you hit owing zero, you get to keep whatever's left of the credit. So you get a refund, you get cashback. Whereas a non-refundable tax credit just reduces what you owe. You don't actually get any money in your pocket from it. So in 2023, 93% of current and former foster youth ages 18 to 25 owed no taxes. So the vast majority of these young people are keeping their cashback credits. And I think that's really important to know, because I know there's often fear of filing is going to somehow, be a detrimental experience for young people. And, 7% owed. Some youth are going to owe, but most are not. So let's talk a little bit about what these credits are. In terms of state credits, like I said, there's the California Earned Income Tax Credit. The concept behind the Cali ITC is that it's for workers. So you must have earned at least $1 during the tax year, but not more than $30,950, because it's for low income workers. So there is a bracket of income that you must stay below to be eligible for it. The credit maximum ranges from as little as $285 to $3,529, really depending on sort of the number of children you have and your income. Now, the Young Child Tax Credit, or the YCTC, is also, just like the Foster Youth Tax Credit, a program under the Cali ITC. So you previously had to have earned income to get the Young Child Tax Credit. That has changed. So now that is not required. So at this point, for the Young Child Tax Credit, it's the same amount as the Foster Youth Tax Credit. There's a lot of parallels. So it's a $1,117 credit. It's provided to parents who earn, under that income that we mentioned, and that have one or more children who are under age 6 in the tax year. And then the child care tax credit. So this you can claim on the state side, you can claim up to $3,000 for one child and $6,000 for more than one child. The children must be under 13 and have lived with you for more than half the tax year. And then lastly, on the state side, there's a renter's credit. So if you lived in California for all of the tax year, paid rent for at least half the tax year, and were not living with a parent or foster parent or legal guardian, you may qualify for the renter's credit. It's either a non-refundable $60 credit for single renters whose income is below $49,220, or it's a non-refundable $120 credit for those who are married or have a registered domestic partner and that file together with incomes below $98,440. So again, this is not an exhaustive list of all the credits on the state or the federal side, but these are the ones that we're seeing young people get, some more commonly and some less commonly. But so that's state. Then on the right side are the federal credits. So there's the federal earned income tax credit. You have to be, if you're under 25, you have to be parenting for this credit, filing as head of household with a qualifying child. Your income, this is more for low to moderate income individuals. So this is income between $1 and $59,187. And the credit maximum is higher than the state one, ranges from $560 to $6,935, depending on the number of children you have and your income. Then we also have the child tax credit on the federal side, which provides parents up to $2,000 for each child under age 17, and you don't need earned income to qualify for this one. And then you have sort of the federal child care tax credit, which is called the Child and Dependent Care Credit, for parents who paid expenses for the care of a qualifying child, to enable you to work or to look for work. So really, like you see, there's a lot of parallels across the state and the federal credits, but they're all slightly different. And these last credits here under federal are for if you're in post-secondary education. There's the American Opportunity Credit, which is up to $2,500 per student. The Lifetime Learning Credit provides $2,000 for college students who paid for qualified education expenses. It's important to know for these, for the education credits, that youth need to save receipts for qualifying expenses for this credit. That means the funding is not taxable if they're using it for qualified expenses. When they're using it for non-qualifying expenses, it becomes taxable. And that is one of the ways that some of those 7% of young people ended up owing taxes, because they had money that was taxable and they didn't put away money to pay those taxes at the end of the year. So this is one of those things, like as an adult supporter, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, that you can be looking for to remind youth, is to keep their receipts and to spend that financial aid on qualified expenses. So I'm going to move on here. And last but not least, before I pass it over to Carla, I just want to share, in case anyone missed this, we have a report. I mentioned we did a webinar in September. We have a report we issued, and it talks about the first year of the tax credit in way more detail than I did on that earlier slide. And there's a link to our webpage, sort of where the webinar recording is, the slides are, and the report is in that URL. And I think Andy just put that link in the chat. So thanks, Andy. So now I'm going to pass it over to Carla, who's going to talk a little bit about something that we've been doing since earlier this year with county child welfare agencies, something that's modeled after some of the work we've done on the FAFSA, where we had a FAFSA challenge. So we now have a tax credit challenge. So Carla is going to talk a little bit about that.
Great. Hello, everyone. Next slide, please. All right, so hello. As Simone mentioned earlier, before I became a consultant, I worked with Santa Clara County Social Services for 23 years. 15 of that was with the Transitioned Aged Youth Bureau. And in 2020, JBAY, John Burton Advocates for Youth, we call them JBAY, approached me with the pilot proposal to turn our youth center into a VITA site. So with JBAY, the county and our contractor for our youth center and our independent living program, the Bill Wilson Center, we all worked closely with United Way Bay Area and the IRS local representative to set up the Hub Youth Center into a VITA site for the 2021 tax season. That year, we served 45 foster youth who collectively received over $135,000 in tax refund. Santa Clara County continues to participate in this challenge. And then in 2022, JBAY brought on 5 additional counties. And then this past tax season, in the first year of the Foster Youth Tax Challenge and implementation of the Foster Youth Tax Credit, 22 counties participated. I'm excited to continue this work with JBAY. This will be my 4th year as an actual VITA volunteer. And here on this slide, you see the counties that our growing list of counties that are signing up to participate in the Foster Youth Tax Challenge for 2024. As seen in an earlier slide, 8.7% of the eligible population received the Foster Youth Tax Challenge. We need everyone's help to increase this percentage and help current and former foster youth get money into their pockets. Next slide. So it is not too late to join us for the 2024 Foster Youth Tax Challenge. You can send me an email with the name of a staff person who will be the lead in your county with their title, phone number, and email, and state at least one goal your county wishes to tackle this next tax season. And the lead role consists of working with your local community partners to develop a plan to get the word out to current and former foster youth of the Foster Youth Tax Challenge or the Foster Youth Tax Credit and how they can claim it. JBAY's website has a ton of resources for you, so you don't have to create anything. And then you would receive data that JBAY will send out regarding how many foster youth have claimed the Foster Youth Tax credit. As Simone said earlier, we get a lot of data from the Franchise Tax Board. So again, thank you for that. And then receive and disperse any new tax information, for example, like deadlines. This past tax season, because of, the weather, they extended the tax deadline. So just receive any information like that. And we understand that not every county has the capacity to become a full-fledged VITA site. However, there are many ways in which you can develop an outreach plan to support current and former foster youth to file their taxes and put money in their pockets. So some of the things that you can do in your county is send out the JBAY Foster Youth Tax Challenge insert that will link foster youth to resources, conduct a Tax 101 workshop, provide and review the tax prep checklists, and help foster youth gather their tax documents. Provide the JBAY self-filing guide that was developed to accompany the tax platform, myfreetaxes.org. Help foster youth schedule tax appointments using the VITA locator. Accompany and transport them to their tax appointments. Work with your local VITA program to conduct self-filing events at your agency, and we can help you connect with them. And in some counties, the social services agency departments are actual VITA sites. And 2 examples are Alameda and San Bernardino. I will now pass it over to Andy.
Thanks, Carla. Andy, I'll advance the slide to the next. And I just want to say right before Andy talks is that this next section is really important because it's the reason we moved this webinar up from January. We used to do this webinar each year in January, sort of to kick off tax season, and we received overwhelming feedback from people, including Andy and Carla, who are both VITA volunteers themselves, noticing that wow, youth really need help preparing. for tax season. And so how can we help youth prepare if we're sharing all this information with people in January? So open up your ears. This section is really important. And we want to make sure that people know how to assist young people with preparing. So thanks, Andy, for covering this section.
Thank you so much, Simone, and good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Andy Lomeli. I am a project manager with JBay. I had the great honor this last year of serving as a VITA volunteer, working directly with youth, partnering with different VITA sites, and got to see firsthand just how we could develop some more best practices for making sure that youth are prepared to be able to file their taxes and, very importantly, successfully claim the foster youth tax credit. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this first slide, we kind of just want to point out, as I'm sure all of you or most of you have prepared your taxes before, you know that it is not easy. And you need to prepare several documents depending on your situation, your income level. Maybe you need W-2s. Maybe you need 1099s if you are self-employed, if you do something like drive for Uber or do like grocery delivery, things like that, then you get a 1099. If you work for an employer, then you're going to get a W-2. If you have certain qualified expenses, then you have receipts. If you received financial aid or were enrolled in school, you have a Form 1090-AT. The list goes on, and we'll go over those very briefly. But the point we really want to drive home here today is that you do need to prepare a lot of documents before you file your taxes, and we want to make sure that you are able to communicate this to youth as well. It's not just as simple as saying, hey, make your appointment, take your ID, the volunteers will take care of you. You do really need to make sure that youth are properly prepared to know exactly which documents they're going to need going into either their VITA appointment with a volunteer or if they're going to be self-filing. And I am going to go into more details about what some of those documents are on this next slide. So very fortuitously, JBay has prepared a checklist of documents that a youth needs to prepare their taxes. It is available at this link, and I believe Simone or somebody will drop the link in the chat as well. You're going to need your government ID, including a driver's license or a passport, your SSN or ITIN number. If you are specifically trying to claim the foster youth tax credit, you want to bring in a verification that you were in care at the relevant time. You want to have access to your permanent address, information on your bank account and routing numbers so that you can potentially get a direct deposit of any money that's owed back to you from the IRS. If you filed taxes in the previous tax year, you want to bring last year's taxes. If you were employed by an employer, in that case, you want to have your W-2. All employers are required to have that W-2 mailed to you in January. So and again, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but if the youth moved or had an updated address, they're going to want to reach out directly to the employer to get that W-2. That's something we saw quite a bit in the past year. Is just they didn't get the W-2. It got lost in the mail, things like that. They really do need to be able to take the step to reach out to the employer to make sure they get the W-2. In a lot of cases, those are available online as well if they have some sort of virtual account through the employment software that the employer is using. If they're self-employed, again, we're seeing that a lot with these youth because we're talking about folks that did grocery delivery, a lot of those digital economy jobs. If you drove for Uber, things like that, then you have a 1099. If you have a savings account, then you have a 1099 INT. If you received any kind of financial aid from an educational institute, you're going to get a 1098-T. And I know we got a question about this. Receipts for qualifying educational expenses directly tied to that Form 1098-T, you do want to be able to collect any receipts for any materials that you purchase that go toward your education. So textbooks, for instance, I know one example we love to use in the past is if you take a class in photography, you have to buy a camera for that class. You have to buy some sort of software as a class requirement. That counts as a qualified expense. You want to be able to save up your receipts for those academic expenses. And lastly, just any receipts from childcare, daycare, summer day camps, anything involved with childcare as well that you'd be able to claim later on when you're filing your taxes. It's a very robust list. Again, it's available in the link. It's in the chat as well as on this slide. Definitely make sure that youth have access to this checklist and that they look and see which items are specifically applicable to them. And then let's look at the next slide, please. All right, then finally, we just want to go over this additional resource. JB has prepared this Taxes 101 curriculum. It's available as a slide deck. Again, I believe that's going to be dropped in the chat, and the link is available on this slide as well. We really want to encourage you all to host, consider hosting a tax prep workshop using our curriculum, the Tax 101. If you are a county ILP program, if you're a community-based provider that's going to be serving foster youth, if you're a foster youth support program at a college, if you have any kind of direct outreach to youth, we definitely encourage you to host this workshop. It covers a robust series of topics, including, generally speaking, what are taxes, why should I file, and when exactly should I file? What are these various tax credits that we're talking about today? How can I specifically file my taxes? And then what happens after I file my taxes? That's a very popular question that we get from a lot of youth is, I filed my taxes, where's my refund? Where's my return? So we'll be going over all the details in that curriculum. Again, it's available for you all at that link. We encourage you to download that, host that, invite youth, and go over that. Within that slide deck, we do have notes with some best practices for the facilitator to be able to go into a little bit more detail beyond what's written on those slides. Let's go to the next slide. And I am going to pass over to my colleague Simone, once again, who's going to be talking about conducting outreach and connecting youth to free filing assistance.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to go on to the next slide here, and we'll get into sort of the meat of this. And again, we're at this tax preparation stage. So that's where we are currently. It's almost, or it is November 1st. And we're in that tax preparation stage. The reason we're sharing all the rest of this information with you today is we want you to know kind of, it'll be January, we'll blink and it'll be January, we all know. And we want you to know what to expect and what's coming. And we want you to be able to give general information to young people who want to know what's coming. So this is all kind of what will be happening closer to January. But right now we're really in that kind of tax preparation stage. So who conducts outreach and how? So this is a pretty straightforward slide, like pretty simple in concept here. But I think the short answer here is obviously anyone can conduct outreach. But I think what the hope is here is that people who work directly with youth in extended foster care or with former foster youth, we hope that you feel a duty to notify youth about this money waiting for them. I think we all know, it's tough in California. Housing and everything else is very expensive. We know young adults, need additional cash, particularly young people who don't have a supportive family or other resources. So we hope everyone feels that duty to notify youth about this resource. And, we're asking that all county child welfare agencies, make their partners aware of this resource. And make the youth on their caseloads aware of this. Same with dependency attorneys, probation officers working with NMDs, any programs serving young people in the community, caregivers. And the best way to get a message to someone is obviously to do it through the regular channels you use. So, you already have touch points with young people. Maybe you meet with them in person monthly. Maybe you text them on a regular basis for check-ins. So use those channels to communicate with them. And we have various kind of resources for communicating with people in different ways. So we'll have, like I mentioned, we have a social media, or I don't think I've mentioned that yet. I will be mentioning that we have a social media toolkit, and it'll include some sample texts as well. Just trying to take the thinking out of this, so people, you all do a lot, trying to make it as easy as possible. So we'll have sample texts, we'll have a social media toolkit, and I really see the social media as an add-on. It's not a targeted direct outreach strategy. It's a broader kind of sprinkled strategy, but texting young people, giving them information in person, those are very direct strategies. So we'll have, hard print things that you can hand young people. We'll have things you can send young people, and even mailers. So I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the mailers concept in a moment. But first, I want to talk about kind of what the message is. We know that it's like file and there's a tax credit, but what are some of the nuances here? What are the really critical messages to get across? So the first message is that, like I said, there's a tax credit waiting for you specifically. For current and former foster youth, you need to file your state taxes to get it. You can't just file federal and expect it to come. You got to file federal and state, and you got to check some boxes on that state tax credit, or on that state tax return. So that's message number one. The second message is, okay, how do I file? Well, you file ideally for free. We know there are paid ways to file, but there are great ways to file for free. So there is free one-on-one assistance to help you file, and there's guiding resources to help you file on your own. So we'll have, kind of, when I say provide the VITA roster self-filing guide, we'll have all of that for you when it's time for youth to file. And then the last message is really, if you can get to a third message there, is be cautious of paid preparers. So it's not advisable. We don't advise you to use one, but they have every right to. If they want to go to a paid preparer, that is their choice. That is okay. We just recommend that youth bring information with them about the foster youth tax credit. Even if you use like a general VITA site that's not a specialized VITA site for foster youth, you should bring it with you, because there's no guarantee that in fact, many tax preparers are not aware of the foster youth tax credit. It's new, it's for a small niche population, and we want to make sure young people get it. So those are kind of the overarching messages that we're wanting to send. Now, like I said, we have outreach materials. So we, on the left, you see, this is from the Franchise Tax Board. So they make these amazing posters and flyers available. So this is, these will be available both electronically and then also hard copies. You can order them, and they'll be mailed to you. So there's an order form on the screen. Right now, it's sort of a pre-order, because I think they're still finalizing some of the details, but you are getting a little sneak preview of it here on the screen, and you can order those through that link. And eventually that link will also contain images that you can look through, and we'll have opportunity to just visit somewhere to download if you want electronic versions. But you can order hard copy posters and flyers from FTB. They will send them to you. Then in the middle here, this year we decided to actually create a flyer, a JBay flyer, because about the tax credit, because we wanted something that had a link to a web page with seasonal information. These flyers have QR codes and links, so they can be print, they can be email, and they will direct youth to a web page that right now has information about preparing to file taxes. We will we'll update that web page on a seasonal basis, so when we're closer to tax filing season, that information will be there. And then we'll also have, like I said, we'll have sample text messages and social media toolkit for outreach as well. And we have a bunch of other resources too. All of our stuff lives in the same place. So I know there's a lot of different links in this PowerPoint. Sometimes that feels overwhelming. At the end of the day, all you need to know, even the order form for the FTB, it's all at this link at the very bottom of the screen. In our resource library, we have sort of a master page of tax filing information. All of our resources related to tax filing and this tax credit live there. So you really need that one link, and you can navigate anywhere you need to get. So just to simplify it for anyone who's like, there's a lot of links. So let's move on. So this is what I alluded to earlier about the mailers. This is a new strategy we're trying this year. we are working right now with 5 counties. We'd be happy to work with as many counties as want to do this. And they are putting flyers or mailers, or what do you want, one pagers, whatever you want to call this thing on the right-hand side, in the payment envelopes that they pay young people who are who are in supervised independent living placements, or who are receiving an infant supplement or an expectant parent payment. So for those of you who are less familiar with kind of the nitty-gritty foster care information like that, youth that are in extended foster care, many of them are in something called a supervised independent living placement. This is a placement where youth receive their foster care payment, monthly foster care payment, directly. So they receive a check from the county every month in an envelope. And the idea is this flyer will be in the envelope with the payment check. Now I know, mailers feels maybe kind of ancient, but I think what's not ancient is people pay attention to money. So when you open a check, when I get a check in the mail, I'm in that envelope, I'm caring about what's in that envelope a lot. So putting this in with checks. So there's also an infant supplement. So young people who are parenting receive an assistance check each month. So putting and the version we have of this for the infant supplement envelopes are actually a little different, and they talk about what you can get as a parenting young person in addition to the foster youth tax credit. So they're tailored based on who they're getting sent to. And what's really cool about this is the little QR code on it. We have trackable QR codes. So for example, if you are Alameda County, which is always the example I use because I live in Alameda County, and you are sending this out, the QR code we have on that flyer is only for your county. So we can then go and tell you how many youth clicked on it, and when. So to kind of understand the impact of this strategy. So like I said, we're kind of trying this out this year. We feel really positive about it. We're really excited about it. And we're happy to work with any counties who want to kind of pilot this. So if you're interested in doing this, there's an interest form. You'll also see this link throughout the presentation because it's an interest form for many different things. You're checking boxes on what you're interested in. And if you want to do these mailers, just indicate so on the interest form. All right. So I think this is my last slide until the next section, but how should we be encouraging youth to file? So there are really 3 ways to file, and that's self-filing, filing with the tax assistance site, so like a free preparer and a paid preparer. But this slide is really how should we be encouraging youth to file? So there are kind of 3 ways we ask you to encourage youth to file. I'm going to just summarize these options, and then Andy and Carla are going to go into these in more detail, and then Luis is going to actually provide an example of one of these options. So self-filing with guided materials. This is, like I said earlier, self-filing. This could be the myfreetaxes.org site where youth are online filing themselves for free. It could be through something like TurboTax where you purchase the software or you get it for free in some cases and you're using the software to file. There is self-filing in small groups, which we call a self-filing event. And that's what Luis will talk about, his experience, his organization's experience with self-filing events. And that's where maybe youth are ready to file on their own, but just want a little more help. So they're doing so with some support. And then there's kind of the most intensive intervention, which is filing one-on-one with free assistance from a certified VITA volunteer. So we'll cover each of these in more depth. I know there's been some questions in the chat about what's VITA, like tell us more about that. So we will in just a moment. And I just want to say all of these options are free. I mean, self-filing is free if you choose the free option, I should say. We don't recommend visiting a paid preparer, and I think Andy's going to outline why not very soon. So I'm going to pass it over to Carla now to talk about self-filing with guided materials.
Hello again. So yes, so as mentioned in an earlier slide, 85% of foster youth self-filed. And we've mentioned this over and over again. So JBay has their self-filing guide that accompanies the myfreetaxes.org website. So this is a platform for taxpayers who make less than $60,000. And Simone mentioned, there's other platforms, free platforms that foster youth can use, like TurboTax. But in my experience working with a lot of foster youth these past 4 years, they've said that it was hard to get to the free version of TurboTax. And unfortunately, I've actually helped a few young people to amend their taxes in TurboTax because they did not get the foster youth tax credit. So it can, it's a hit or miss. So, definitely, we're really encouraging, the myfreetaxes.org, because we do have that self-filing guide that, is very detailed, and that can help young people go through, that can help them, go through self-filing. With whatever platform the foster youth decides to use, it is very important to ensure that they are informed of the foster youth tax credit, and that they check the boxes that, one, states that they were in foster care on or after their 13th birthday, and then two, provide the consent to the California Franchise Tax Board to verify their eligibility with the California Department of Social Services. It's very important that they check those two boxes in order to get the foster youth tax credit. Next slide. So some young people may be very hesitant to file their taxes on their own. A lot of young people I worked with, they're like, oh, I was afraid to make a mistake. I just want a little bit of help. I want to make sure I'm entering all the information correctly in all the different boxes, like on the W-2s. It could be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're filing for the first time. And, as adults, we always get a little nervous when it comes to tax time. Like, we're always thinking, how much are we going to have to owe? But for most of our young people, very few actually owe any money. So they shouldn't be very fearful about this. And we all know that tax filing is an important financial literacy skill that all foster youth need to learn, and some may want to learn how to do it on their own. They just need a little bit of guidance. So having, a self-filing in small groups is a great way for those young people who they want to learn, but they just need that little extra support. So you might want to consider hosting a self-filing event in collaboration with a VITA program near you to support those who want to file on their own. It's very important to note that some of the VITA sites that are now, they're starting to plan their calendars for the tax season. So you want to contact them as soon as possible to see if they are willing to come and host a self-filing event at your site. And like I said earlier, we can help connect you with that. All right, so next slide. So on this slide, here is how you can host a self-filing event. This can be done in person or virtually. Again, find a local VITA site in your community. Definitely do this now rather than later. And what you can do is start a sign-up list, outreach to current and former foster youth ahead of time. Have them sign up for a slot to attend a self-filing event. For either event, you need secure Wi-Fi. So especially for the host with a virtual event, and then also you want to send the invite with a passcode. So you definitely, want to have that security there, because there's going to be, personal information. And for staffing, in my experience, you should have a 1-to-5 ratio of VITA volunteers to foster youth. And if you have an in-person event, you want at least 2 agency staff present for any logistical issues at your agency. And then for the virtual, one should be a host. And then, for the in-person, you want to have, someone to open and close, greet foster youth, help with printing returns, call youth before the event to make sure they have all their documents ready, and even call youth the day of the event to remind them, hey, you RSVP'd for this tax event, either come in, or are they going to attend it virtually? So there's a lot of legwork. As earlier we mentioned, that it takes a lot of work to help young people gather their documents and be ready. So same thing with, reminding them, hey, you signed up for this event, don't forget to be there, bring all of your documents with you. So really a lot of that prep work needs to happen. For a virtual event, JBay held some virtual tax events this past tax season, and we used Zoom. So foster youth, I'll just give you an overview of what that looked like. So foster youth enter into the main room. Once all the youth are in, the host reviews the myfreetaxes.org self-filing guide. And then you give time to the foster youth to create their own account and get started with entering the basic information like name, social, all of that. And then on the back end, each volunteer is set up with a breakout room. And so when a youth needs individual attention, the host will assign the youth to a volunteer's breakout room where they can share their screen and they get that individualized attention and help them self-file. Youth can use their own computer or phone. I worked with some youth who used their phone. It was difficult for me. The font was just way too small, even with glasses. So I don't recommend that. If youth have a computer, encourage them to use that. And sometimes with their phone, it just took a long time to get from one page to the next. So computers are a lot easier to use. For an in-person event, you want to have some privacy for the individual youth as they're, entering their personal information into the tax platform. So you either want to have a large meeting room or some mid-sized rooms, and just again, have privacy for each of the foster youth as they're inputting their information, and have the self-filing guide at each station. Again, the equipment, you should have laptops available with the secure Wi-Fi. You can encourage foster youth if they want to bring their own. So depending on, what you decide to do. But then you also want to have a printer available, because some youth actually want that physical copy of their tax return, and have envelopes ready so they can, slide those in envelopes. And when I was a VITA volunteer with Santa Clara County and I did it in person, I always made sure, I would label it, this is your tax year 2022, 2021. And I'd always tell them to, put this in a safe place, at least on their laptop. They can, secure it on their laptop someplace, create a folder, but I always encourage them to keep at least 5 years of their tax returns, just, best practice for them. So, those are the ways you can have a self-filing event in person or virtual. So other things you want to consider: offer a tax preparation class, or as we mentioned earlier, the Tax 101 workshop 2 weeks before an actual event. That gives the foster youth time to actually gather all of their documents. You want to go over that JBay tax prep checklist, make sure, whatever situation they're in, W-2, 1098-T, you want to make sure they gather all of that. And, especially with the W-2, as Andy mentioned earlier, it's really important they gather all W-2s. Even if they only worked for one employer for one day, you want to get that W-2. And some youth may have complex tax returns. For example, if they're self-employed or they receive a substantial amount of scholarships and grants that may be taxable, and they need help to maximize their return, or they received a tax error code when they tried to self-file, you want to be able to help them to schedule a one-on-one VITA tax appointment for further help. So, as it says on this slide, you want to triage, because again, if they self-file and they get that error code, you want to look up that error code you can Google it, and it tells you why they received that code. And a lot of times with that, you eventually have to do a paper file. So, you want that young person to get support with that. So again, that's like perfect example of how you want to, if that happens, you want to, help that young person get a one-on-one tax appointment at a VITA site. And then for an in-person event, you should have food and drinks available. We all know young people, they love food. They like to get fed. So you want to have that available for them. And then for both the in-person or virtual, you can offer raffle prizes or gift cards to foster youth who successfully file. And now I want to hand it over to Luis Madrid and share Aspiranet's experience with a self-filing event.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Madrid with the SpiritNet. As Simone said, we're a very large organization statewide. We have a large continuum, essentially serving a youth from birth all the way to the age of 26. My division is the TAY division, so that's what I will be speaking on today. And we have 11 TAY offices across the state. I'm going to focus particularly on the experience that we had on our Riverside office, just because it was the largest self-filing event, not only for our agency, but as far as I'm concerned with JV, I think it was the largest up to this point. So we had a variation of filing events across the state, because of the multiple offices that we serve. But it's just in looking at the term self-filing itself could be a little deceiving, quite frankly, because there's really not a lot of self that came into this. And I'll speak a little bit about that as we go through this. You're going to see that collaboration, pre-preparation, preparation is the key to a successful event. Everything they talked about right now, as far as, doing this, all the tools that they provided are going to be critical if we want to be able to have a successful event. So I'll talk a little bit about the one in Riverside. This was a collaboration between Riverside Community College and the Community Action Partnership of Riverside County came together and prepared this event. They were in very close communication and doing a lot of outreach to predominantly other, TAY providers that are offering either THP Plus or THPP and MD. In some of our other offices, there were other key players in the community, but identifying those key players in your community, is going to be critical. I'll give you a little bit of the summary as you can see it there, and then I'll dive into a little bit of more detail. But we had 40 youth attend. Again, this is our first time doing this. Was very successful. We're, obviously aiming to do it bigger and better this year across the state. But we had 40 youth attend. 25 of them were able to file that same day and complete the process. 15 of the youth were missing documents or had more complicated tax situations that came up, so they had to schedule some one-on-one with the VITA folks. Let me talk a little bit about the pre-event, and they might have used a different term with this, but it is critical that you have some type of pre-event where you're meeting with the youth and you're going over what they're going to need. At this age, quite frankly, I don't know that, I can speak for myself. Taxes was not at the top of my priority list. It's a pretty intimidating process. One of the huge advantages with these events is that they're dealing with trusted people. It helps when we're in this room walking alongside with them, knowing that, okay, these are people that I can trust, because it's not easy to give your social security number and all these other things, particularly as a foster youth, where we know that, at times they may have issues with trusting who they give their information, or identity theft is high, amongst this population. So this was a great effort between these three organizations, meeting with them. We had food, like it was mentioned, provided them an incentive to file taxes, to get an incentive, because I don't know that sometimes our youth realize how important this is and what they can get off of this. So we provided food, we provided them with an incentive, which is I believe a $25 gift card that we have provided them. But again, I can't emphasize the importance of that one-on-one, and not necessarily one-on-one, but just that pre-prep before they come. Otherwise, for those of us that have been doing this for a while, you have a higher probability that the youth will show up to the actual event with just simply their, ID at hand and missing some of the documents, So although we still had some that might have showed up that weren't prepared, we had a good amount of youth that were able to show up, and prepared. And again, we see this again over and over with whether it's taxes that we're doing a workshop on for preparation, or whether it's something that we're helping out with a Section 8 voucher. Meeting with them, preparing them, making sure that they understand is going to be critical. So that's a little bit of what happened there, you know, in Riverside. You know, our SpiritNet office was able to coordinate with the college, particularly the Guardians program, you know, which you all might be familiar, target this population, and then, you know, identifying who that VITA site was going to be, you know. So it's just pretty amazing to have these youth in a room full of people that are just walking around waiting to answer the question. That's what I mean about the self-filing being maybe the word self a bit deceiving. You know, when you hear 85% did it self, it's like, oh wow, like are you, you know, so but I would attribute that to the fact that it's not really self, it's with a group of people that are guiding them, and it's critical that it happens in that manner from our experience. So, you know, between our Riverside and also between, you know, we had a very successful event in Kern, Bakersfield. Between those two offices alone, we were able to secure, you know, close to $50,000 in refunds for our youth, which is pretty amazing. And that's not counting some of our other offices. We're a large organization that, you know, for purposes of this presentation, the focus was going to be on this particular one. So again, I would just encourage everyone, first and foremost, you know, you hear about all these things. We've lived it. It happens. The money comes in. It's amazing, you know, but it takes coordination. Identify those key players in your counties, and please utilize the tools that JBay has put together. They're amazing. You don't have to be an expert. You know, we're walking around with the VITA volunteers as staff members. We have questions ourselves, but you know, we're all in it together, and the VITA people are wonderful. So I would just use the tools they have, and you will start to see these refunds come in for the youth in large amounts.
Thank you, Luis, so much for sharing a SpiritNet's experience. I'm going to pass it off to Andy now to talk a little bit more about the VITA sites that I know people are like, tell us more about VITA. What is that?
Thanks again, Simone. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so what is a VITA site? A VITA site is a volunteer income tax assistance site that offers free one-on-one tax return preparation to people who qualify, and those are folks that earn $60,000 or less. Importantly, VITA sites every single one of them is certified by the IRS. It is partially funded by the IRS, and volunteers are required to be IRS certified. They go through a very specific training that is prepared by the IRS. I did it this past year, and so they are well acquainted with all the different tax situations that may arise. We do want to point out today that there are not enough VITA sites across California to serve every individual that may qualify. That is to say, every individual that makes less than $60,000. These are described as VITA deserts, and they're across some regions in California. Very helpfully, a lot of these VITA sites, in addition to offering in-person assistance, also offer remote assistance over something like Zoom. Those services, again, are at certain sites across California and are available for youth who, again, maybe they don't have the most robust transportation options. They have work or childcare issues and can't make themselves available. So they can go ahead and sign on for a virtual appointment with one of several VITA sites. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. JBay has specifically partnered with several CBOs, some organizations across the state, to establish VITA sites that are going to particularly serve current and former foster youth. We definitely urge you, for the youth that want to be connected with a VITA site, to take advantage of one of these sites. This is particularly for youth who may not be comfortable with, or maybe they're not capable of self-filing, and they should be specifically directed to a VITA site. Some other circumstances that may lead a youth to want to go to a VITA site specifically, include if they were potentially a victim of identity theft. If they have a complicated tax situation, maybe they have to paper file. That is to say, they have to file using and print out their returns and mail them. Maybe they have some complex tax forms. They have some 1099s. And some youth just need a lot of support. Going back to the identity theft piece, we definitely do want to point out that as you prepare youth, just to make sure that, some of the youth we saw this past year, they had people in their lives that may have known their address, may have had their information, grandparents, etc., that filed and claimed the youth as a dependent. In these cases, the youth is no longer eligible for the foster youth tax credit because you can't be claimed as a dependent on somebody else's return. There are all these kind of complex situations. When this is the case, when it's not just a simple, hey, I have my W-2, I work for this job, maybe I got a scholarship and I have like 2 tax forms, you want to go ahead and encourage them to go to a VITA site where they'll be able to work one-on-one with an IRS certified volunteer. If this is a general VITA site and not necessarily one of these, again, these JBay partnered VITA sites that are going to be specifically serving current and former foster youth, we want to definitely encourage youth to bring information about the foster youth tax credit to ensure that the site's volunteers are aware of this credit. In the case of the VITA sites that we're partnering with that are going to be serving foster youth, they're all aware of the foster youth tax credit. We've prepared several resources for volunteers so that they know specifically how to claim the credit. That might not be the case at other VITA sites that aren't specifically serving this target population. Maybe they're just not aware of the foster youth tax credit. They're not going to go out of their way to ask youth, hey, are you a former foster youth? Might you be eligible for this credit? So again, if you're going to one of these VITA sites, go in with information. Be sure to indicate, hey, I believe I am eligible for this specific credit. JBay does have a one-pager that is going to be available specifically toward general VITA sites and paid preparers. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, and lastly, I want to touch on paid preparers. Again, in a case where a youth is going to go to a paid preparer, we just want to encourage them to proceed with caution. There are some reasons we want to point out as to specifically why we would not encourage a youth to go to a paid preparer. First of all, in our research from this past year, just 5% of everyone who successfully claimed the FYTC filed with a paid preparer, as opposed to 57% of people who received the Cali ITC, they filed with a paid preparer. So this just shows that if you're going with a paid preparer, a lot of them tend to miss the FYTC. Secondly, upwards of 60% of paid preparers will make errors on your tax return. And that isn't even just exclusive to the foster youth tax credit. That can be applicable to all sorts of different issues. They could make an error anywhere in the foster youth tax, in your tax filing. Next point is just that some paid preparers we've seen will use predatory practices. That includes a refunded advancement with interest. So as you may be aware, it takes a couple weeks for somebody to get their tax return. Some of these paid preparers may say, hey, we'll give you cash today. It'll be considered a loan against this refund, and we're going to go ahead and charge you interest for that. Not necessarily every paid preparer, but we have seen that with a handful. And lastly, if a tax preparer makes an error, or one of those errors that we talked about before, or if they miss a credit, if they miss a foster youth tax credit, youth can go back to the paid preparer, but they have to pay again. They have to pay another fee for the preparer to make an amendment to their taxes. So again, that's just more money coming out of the pocket of the youth to ensure that their taxes are filed accurately. Now, again, we've given these reasons as to why youth should not necessarily go to a paid preparer as a first choice. Some youth will still want to go to a paid preparer if they choose to do so, as is the case with other VITA sites that aren't specifically serving foster youth populations. We want to encourage youth to take information about the foster youth tax credit. Be sure to point out to the paid preparer, hey, I believe I'm eligible for the foster youth tax credit. Here is my verification letter that proves that I was in care at some point that makes me eligible. Because again, that is not necessarily going to be a point of focus for the paid preparer. And lastly, if the youth does use a paid preparer and the paid preparer misses the foster youth tax credit, maybe they miss other credits that the youth that would have otherwise qualified for and should have qualified for, the youth can then take that filed return and go to a VITA site for free and file an amendment. That's right, you can file an amendment for an existing tax return at a VITA site. Just go ahead and make that appointment. Again, going back to the VITA site is there for more complex situations, and that includes amendments. We're going to go ahead and go to the next slide, where I believe I will pass over once again to my colleague Carla to talk about the aftermath of filing your taxes.
Thanks, Andy. And Carla, we have about 5 minutes, and then we're going to go into Q&A.
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. All right, next slide. All right, so taxes are filed, what now? One thing that we know is foster youth, word of mouth is a huge way of how information gets across with our foster youth. We're waiting to see what's going to happen this next tax season, if there's going to be a high percentage of amendments needed to be done because young people, they filed but did not know about the foster youth tax credit. Just this past tax season, I did do quite a few amendments, a couple with TurboTax, a couple with two sisters that went to a paid preparer, and then they came to a VITA site and did an amendment. So definitely, we're sort of like with, waiting to see what's going to happen. So we'll just wait to see. And then another thing is that a lot of foster youth, unfortunately, because they move from multiple placements, and there's a lot of adults that have access to their private information. So unfortunately, they are particularly vulnerable to identity theft. And counties are mandated to remediate identity theft for foster youth. For foster youth ages 18 to 21, social workers or an adult supporter are advised to support them in running their credit annually by using annualcreditreport.com. And if there's any suspicious activity, foster youth are referred to legal services to help remedy the situation. And unfortunately, foster youth are vulnerable with tax fraud as well. This can be someone falsely claiming them as a dependent on their tax returns, or using their information to receive the federal or state child credits. And as we saw in years past, to claim stimulus payments. In the 2021 Santa Clara County pilot, 7% of the 45 current and former foster youth that were served experienced tax fraud. In fraud cases, a paper file must be submitted, and depending on the reason why an e-file was rejected, additional documentation may be required. And so it's highly encouraged, because this can be a tedious process, it's highly encouraged that counties work with their local dependency attorneys who represent the foster youth in court, or locate a legal aid to help develop a plan on how to support foster youth with tax fraud. And the IRS website has a lot of helpful tips and documents. The foster youth can obtain an identity protection PIN, complete and submit an identity theft affidavit, request a copy of the fraudulent return, and go to identitytheft.gov, a Federal Trade Commission website, to report identity theft. But again, this is just an overwhelming process for any foster youth, even for some adults, to tackle. So they really need that legal help to support them, to walk them through that process. Next slide. So what happens when a young person gets a letter from the IRS? They must respond in 30 days. And again, one thing that I always, like to inform young people, and this message needs to, even just for adults as well, that the IRS never, or the FTB, they never communicate by phone. It's all through mail. So they'll never receive a phone call saying, hey, you owe us money. It's always by mail. And, the reasons why foster youth could receive a letter from the IRS particularly is because they need verification that their children were in their care during that tax year, or more information is needed because of self-employment, especially if they were paid in cash. I had one experience with a young lady that she needed to provide more verification of her foster youth status. So again, they have 30 days to respond. And if they need help, they should immediately ask their social worker, CASA, case manager, or attorney for help to decipher what is being asked. It is very important, as mentioned earlier, it is very important for foster youth to keep receipts of, their, anything they spent for post-secondary education, self-employment expenses. They need to keep that, stored in a, in a place that they'll remember. This past tax season, I worked with a young man who kept all of his receipts in a box, even ones that, we couldn't use. He just was like, I just kept everything. So he kept them all in a box, and it just made the tax appointment go more smoothly, because sometimes the tax appointments, if they don't have everything readily available, they have to come back. And that could be time consuming for a young person. So you want to make sure, we keep on prefacing this, help them get prepared. And then, again, these receipts will help reduce their taxable income. So again, really important to help them to get those documents. Another idea that you may want to consider for any counties that are on the call is to add the foster youth tax credit and the importance of keeping all your receipts and just tax preparation in general. Add that to a child family team EFTs, as well as the 90-day transition meetings. So just a thought to add that to those meetings to help encourage foster youth all around to keep receipts and get ready for tax season. Simone, take it away.
Thanks, Carla. So we're at Q&A here. I'm just going to make one more plug, which is, we talked about VITA. These are run by volunteers, or not run, but the taxes are done by volunteers, as you heard. And so I know some people say, well, I want to volunteer. What can I do? You can do this. This is such a great volunteer opportunity. What's better than helping young people get money? That would put a smile on my face if I was the young person or the person helping them. So if you want to volunteer, please sign up. These 4 sites here on the screen are accepting volunteers right now. And even if you're still considering and not sure, reach out to them, have a conversation. And I'm not going to stay on the screen long because I want to go into Q&A, but like we'll send this out. So you'll have all these links and this information later today. So I'm going to jump into Q&A here. The first question, I'm asking this one, this comes up a lot, and this is a great one to address. Do youth need to report subsidies from like THP plus stipends that they receive as income? Carla, I'm going to send this one to you.
No, they do not. Any incentives or payments that foster youth receive from the county or from the THP Plus, that's the aftercare housing program for young people 21 to 25, that is not earned income. Youth have to report earned income.
Thank you. We'll do one more kind of technical question here for Carla. Is a W-2 required for proof of income?
They need their W-2 if they get cash income. Some of our youth receive cash income like babysitting, yard work, what have you. You want to get a letter from that person that they are, providing that service for. So, and some young people don't have, they were not able to get their W-2, but you can actually go on the IRS website, you can request a oh my gosh, I can't. It's like a summary of your W-2. So you can request one of those. It's transcript, a W-2 transcript. So you can get a transcript because that is needed to, when you do your taxes.
Thanks, Carla. So this question, can the filer also file married jointly and receive the foster youth tax credit? So this is the fun news. So, with the child tax credits, you can't, like, both parents can't claim them for the same child, right? Like you file together and you claim, one credit, or you're filing separately and only one of you claims it. With the foster youth tax credit, you can file with your partner, and you can still receive the credit. And if they are eligible for their credit, they can receive it too. So if two foster youth are married or former foster youth, they can both receive the credit. It goes to you as an individual, versus, as into one household. So I thought that's a good question. Another kind of, I guess, another technical question here. If I file taxes in another state, does this tax credit apply? Andy, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, so you need to be living in California for at least 6 months of the tax year to be eligible. And you are going to be wanting to be filing taxes in California, as this credit is specific to the state of California.
Thank you. One of our VITA partners reminded us, thinking also about reminding impacted clients to look out for the arrival of identity protection PIN between November and January for those who have been issued this. Carla, you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, so the identity protection PIN, that is for foster youth who have experienced any kind of tax fraud. So you can go actually onto the IRS website to obtain one, or if you forgot your PIN, you can go on there and, reset your password. They may ask for other document, like other specific information, but you definitely want to get that ready to go.
Great. And, I think this is I'm getting a few questions on this. And I knew this would happen sort of when we were thinking about this webinar. And I don't know what the best way to address it is, but people are asking, I'm not seeing a VITA site in my area. The VITA roster is limited right now because we're at the very end of tax season. We're almost in this like post tax season place. And so we didn't want to list a bunch of sites on there that are temporarily closed during off season, but I know it's a little bit hard to use that tool right now when you don't know where your site is. So I would recommend visiting later when it's updated for the 2024 tax season. Carla, what's going on with the VITA locator for the general sites? Is it also sort of down until then, or do you know?
They will update it. So if, again, the IRS, if you go there and type in VITA locator tool, it will, you type in your zip code, and then it tells you what VITA sites are located in your area. And it does give very specific information about those different locations, what type of VITA service they provide, in person, drop off, one-on-one, how you can schedule. And they do tell, they do let you know like what, the time frame of when they're open. So you can also use that as a tool. And again, as we mentioned earlier, you definitely want to bring something, a young person that uses a non-foster youth specific VITA service, you want to make sure you have information about the foster youth tax credit and that, yes, this person qualifies for that credit.
Thank you. One person wanted to know what type of documentation the county can provide to foster youth to quickly or easily help them verify their foster youth status. Is it court documents or is it a simple letter on letterhead? Carla, you want to take that one too?
Yes, so you want to request a dependency letter. So that letter consists of, you normally, because I used to write those a lot when I worked for Santa Clara County, you put the dates of when they are dependent and that they were, yes, they were a dependent in foster care. These are the dates that they were a dependent, and if their case is currently open or it's closed. So, they can go to the ILP coordinator, their social worker, probation officer, and request a dependency letter.
Great. I have a couple questions about filing previous year tax returns. Andy, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like? Like if you show up and you're like, I've never filed my taxes, and like what are the options?
Yes, so you can file up to, and I know I might get, it's up to 3 years in previous returns. We do want to encourage you to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, going back to, I'm always thinking, going back 3 years. And then if you go to a VITA site, you can go ahead and have that submitted for up to 4 previous years. I believe, is that correct, Simone?
Carla is their best quality control person here. So Carla, you answer.
You can definitely do last 3 years. And if you go to VITA site initially, you may want to check in with that before you go to see how far back years they will do your tax returns. Keep in mind, the past years beyond 3 years may be paper file.
Great. Oh, someone just said youth cannot file past year taxes online. They have to file on paper. Isn't that one that you just go back too far though, Carla?
So, because working with one foster youth this past tax year, we were able to do, and then back. So that, we were able to e-file the past years. But again, like I said, if you go beyond that, you just want to check in with the VITA site to see if they can go beyond that.
Great. Someone wants to know about, I know I'm getting notes, Carla, that you're breaking up just a little bit. We're getting a little bit of, but it's okay. We'll move on. I'll pitch the next one to Andy. Someone wants to know a little bit more about self-filing events. If they want to host a self-filing event, what are the first initial steps they need to take? I know we sort of went over this in the slide, but Andy, if you want to just kind of maybe re-summarize the sketch of this.
Definitely. So again, you definitely do want to fill out an interest form, which we've linked in the chat a couple times. I'm sure somebody will drop it in right now. And it's, you're going to be, this is a great opportunity if you have access to youth, if you have access to youth that will qualify for this, if you have access to a site, by site, I mean, a room with several different laptops or computers, and a good wireless connection or, any kind of internet connection for them. We do encourage, again, about a 5-to-1 youth to volunteer ratio. You can do, and what we did this year is we were able to connect some of those volunteers remotely through Zoom. There are a couple, and again, we have several different resources, and those are available to you if you go ahead and fill out the interest form.
Great. I'm actually putting it in the chat right now. I'm a bad multitasker, sorry. For self-filing event. Okay, I'm putting the interest form in now. Okay, let's do one last question. I think we have 1 more minute left. If a student worked the previous year but did not file taxes, can the student proceed to file for the current year? So I think they're asking, do they have to file a previous year in order to file the current year if they've missed the previous year? So the answer to this is no. You can file, like if you want to just file your 2024 taxes next year and you didn't file last year, you don't have to file your 2023 taxes to file your 2024 taxes. But why not do it, right? If you're leaving some money on the table, you'd want to do it. But that's the answer to that question. Well, I think we are at time. Carla, Andy, Luis, any parting words you want to share with people before we leave today?
No, just, again, if you want to get connected to a local VITA program in hopes to maybe get on their calendar to host a self-filing event, definitely let us know. We've worked with some across the state, so we know of some of them, but we can try to help and connect. And yeah, just and hold, really encouraging all of you to use the curriculum for a Tax 101 workshop. So definitely, start looking at, holding some of those, now to help the young people start thinking about what they need to get to file their taxes.
Well, and one person just chatted that they'd love to become a VITA volunteer, but they're not seeing any opportunities in their county of San Bernardino and Riverside. But they said, is there an option for those of us who are there? So that's a great question. Some of these sites that we listed on the screen do virtual, they have virtual volunteers that help youth virtually. And so, Carla, am I wrong that they could sign up to be a volunteer with one of those sites virtually?
Yes, so definitely, LA has a site there. So you sign up with LA County, and then they will get you connected to how to do the training and become a VITA volunteer.
Fantastic. Luis, Andy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say this is the time start reaching out and identifying those key players. It's never too early. It's sticking on the region of Riverside, which is where I spoke mainly about. This year we already have UC Riverside expressing interest. So this is the time to start planning and identifying those key players. And if you haven't yet, reviewing all these tools that JB has put together, they're wonderful.
I'll just add, make sure youth are on the lookout for their W-2s. Make sure they know how to access their 1098-Ts from their financial aid websites, and if not W-2, the 1099 from self-employment. Be on the lookout for all those documents and be sure to have them ready.
Great. And if we didn't answer your question today, because I know we didn't get to all of them, feel free to email any of us on the screen right here. Thanks, and have a great rest of the week.